Ben Shapiro is very upset that JD Vance went on Joe Rogan's show and hurt his feelings because he criticized Israel. You can't do that. Ben Shapiro loves America so much that he wants America to completely serve Israel. So, and apparently he's also mad that he's slightly criticized Wall Street. Oh no, Ben Shapiro's two favorite things in the world: dirty bankers on Wall Street who rob us blind, and Israel who robs us blind. Sharon has the story.
Yeah, Cenk, Shapiro had three main problems with Vance's comments. We'll break those down for you. First, Shapiro was mad that Vance called out an Israeli influencer. We did cover that story earlier this week. In case you missed it, though, here's what Vance had to say.
There was a Time story that came out yesterday that basically there are certain influencers in America who are being paid in order to attack the deal. People are always going to try to influence the United States of America, whether they're allies of ours or whether they're enemies of ours. But again, when I open up the pages of Time magazine and I see that there's a literal foreign influence campaign being funded to tank the very deal that I was pursuing, and oh, by the way, many of the people who were receiving that money were actually attacking me in completely dishonest ways, you know, my response to that is, well, go to hell. I'm going to do what I have to do for the American people. I represent Americans first, and that's the way that I've tried to do this job.
So now let's get Shapiro's direct response on this one. Listen.
The vice president, in order to defend his bad deal and his bizarre view of foreign policy in which Iran is, a potential friendly, and the Pakistanis are friendlies, and the Qataris are friendlies, and they're all friendlies. But also Israel manipulates our foreign policy. In order for the vice president to back that, he has to set up a series of straw men and then set them aflame. When faced with the fact that his MOU was just a bad deal, the vice president then fell back on conspiracy theorizing about how everyone who opposed him is naturally in the pay of the nefarious Israelis, which is just dummy stuff. I'm sorry, it's stupid. It's dumb. You know who opposed the MOU? Anyone who had an ounce of brain power with regard to how Iran acts in the Middle East and has been acting for full on half a century. It's just silly talk. It's silly talk. Well, here's the vice president doing some rather conspiratorial silly talk, citing an article, by the way, from Time magazine that was essentially planted by his allies in the first place.
So that was issue number one. Here's the second one that Shapiro has. It has to do with economic policy. Here's a clip of Vance's comments followed by Shapiro's response.
Does the socialism thing scare me? Yes. Is it the wrong solution? Yes. But one thing I try to persuade my fellow Republicans of is socialism is the alternative if we don't have a pathway to give people a sense that the system is not rigged and that the American dream is attainable. That's like our job. That's what we have to do. I'm not saying Rome was built in a day. It's not going to be easy to undo some of these economic trends. But man, we ran the experiment. We ran the experiment of offshoring all of our industrial jobs, of becoming a services and finance economy, and allowing Wall Street to come in and buy every asset of modern life and turn it into an investable, line goes up asset. And what has that done? It's created a generation of kids who kind of are attracted to socialism. We have to fix that problem.
Well, let's be real about this. Young people in America have always been attracted to left-wing economic policy. That is not some sort of giant shock. When the vice president gives credence to all of the strawmen and lies of the socialists, that America has offshored all of our jobs, not true. That America's services economy is some sort of gigantic failure, not true. That America's economy is some sort of rigged system in which no one can get ahead, not true.
Last but not least, Shapiro took issue with the fact that JD Vance claimed Jeffrey Epstein had connections to U.S. and Israeli intelligence without providing receipts.
When JD Vance goes on Joe Rogan's show and unleashes yet another dumb theory about Jeffrey Epstein, but he says it in the form of the Vice President of the United States, claiming connections with the highest levels of American and Israeli intelligence on behalf of pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. I have one question. You're the vice president. Why not release your evidence, sir? If you were elected to uncover all of this, you're doing a pretty bad job of it. If you have questions on what's going on between Jeffrey Epstein and, say, American intelligence, the CIA, or Mossad, or whatever, if you have questions, There's a person who's very, very high ranking in the United States government with the plenary capacity to gather that information. He exists in the mirror for the vice president. So pushing unbased conspiracy theorizing on Joe Rogan, it is unworthy of the office.
All right, so there you have issues 1, 2, and 3, Ben Shapiro versus JD Vance. Cenk, why don't we start with number 3 that put Epstein front and center and dissect the argument, who's winning, who's lacking in that argument?
Yeah, so first of all, Jeffrey Epstein was definitely working with the Israelis. Drop Site News has proved it. He procured cyber weapons for them. He represented them all the way back in the Iran-Contra affair when the CIA worked with him to clean out the planes they brought the drugs in. So our government has been aware of Epstein and who he works for this entire time. Epstein also made deals on behalf of Israel with Russia and Mongolia and great number of countries. His best friend was the person who ran the Oslo Accords, the same Oslo Accords where Israel got to claim, oh, we offered something to the Palestinians, but they didn't take it. It's all their fault for us taking their land.
You've got to make sure you're getting your news from a range of sources that help you see the real story, not some biased version of the truth. That's why we've been relying on our partners over at Ground News. They're a small independent team who built an app and website that gathers news from across the political spectrum so you can compare coverage on any issue with data on each source's political bias, credibility, and even ownership. I found this headline through Ground News, and I think it's worth digging into. 2 January 6 police officers sue Trump to block $1.8 billion lawfare fund. Now, this is a pretty loaded headline, and when I look at it on Ground News, I can understand the story better than I can from the headline alone. Ground News shows me that over 300 sources covered this particular story, with only 12% of that coverage coming from right-leaning sources. Now, I can also see the distinct differences in how the left and the right frame this story. For example, this high factuality source on the left is calling this a $1.8 billion slush fund for the insurrectionists on January 6th, while this right-leaning mixed factuality source is calling this a lawfare victims fund. Same story, 2 completely different implications, but I wouldn't have that context without Ground News. We have a president who plays fast and loose with the facts, and too much of the media unfortunately does the same. But I think Ground News is solving that issue, and it's one we've talked about a lot on this channel. The overload, distraction, the missing context that's skewing our perspective of the news. So if you're tired of the chaos, we've got 40% off their Vantage plan. Just go to ground.news/TYT or scan the QR code. I really think it's worth checking out.
And on and on and on it goes. The Israeli prime minister went there 30 times. The Israelis had tape, had the place bugged. They had Mossad agents there. It's the most obvious thing in the world. But mainstream media works for Israel. Ben Shapiro works for Israel. So they all cover it up and don't report it. It's disgusting. And it shows you that the degree to which corporate media completely and utterly serves Israel. The facts are not in dispute. The emails were from Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel. No one has disputed the emails. No one has disputed the stories. They just go, yeah, but you shouldn't report on it because you should shut up and serve Israel. So in that case, JD Vance, barely touched on it. He was talking about the tip of the iceberg. The iceberg is much, much worse. And then the reason that Ben Shapiro says oh yeah, why don't you just release the intelligence, is because he knows that Trump is compromised. That's why Trump is desperately holding on to the Epstein files. And even though it's done massive damage to his presidency, he won't ever release them. And that's why he's played softball with Ghislaine Maxwell. That's why they haven't arrested a single other perpetrator. And Shapiro knows that. And since Shapiro knows that, he goes, I'll do this cute little trick where I'll say, oh, why don't you release the files? When in fact, if Vance tried to release the files, Ben Shapiro's head would explode. He'd be so enraged. How dare you do this to Israel? Epstein had nothing to do with Israel. Come on, everybody knows this. This is so, look, Sharon, what's interesting about it is that Shapiro doesn't really question any of the facts. He just says, this is silly, and the vice president shouldn't be doing this. But those aren't really factual arguments. He brought no receipts at all. And in the defense of the bankers, I thought that was really interesting. He says, well, young people, of course, support policies that are more honest. I mean, he calls it socialist, but who wants the bankers to rip us off? We're not worried about the bankers being bankers. We're worried about how they're rigging the system and having unfair advantages because they paid off the politicians who then set the rules on their behalf. But Ben Shapiro makes the argument, no, the status quo in America is great. The system's terrific. We shouldn't change anything. But Sharon, why did Trump get elected? Because most of the country, and including a giant percentage, almost all of the Republicans that voted for Trump, were desperate for change. So here he is telling the Republicans, shut up, you're not gonna get any change. You're just gonna serve Israel. And then I'll get to the last clip in a second. But that's what it looks like to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. You have Shapiro doing this traditional conservative thing and ignoring the changing of the guard. I do wonder, though, how long Vance is going to be able to straddle this thing, because you still have Republican donors and, his boss who ran on things that he had no intention of pushing through for the average everyday, make America great, true-blooded, if you will, American. So it's just, this seems like this whole struggle here, and how much longer can Vance straddle it, and how much longer can, frankly, Shapiro do that wink, wink thing that you said, release the files and tell us that, people have woken up and they're very serious about what's going on here, and they're not going with this same old Israel okey doke line.
Yeah, and then the first clip, he's like, it's a silly idea that Israel's paying anybody in the media, except for the fact that it's on paper. Brad Parscale, registered as a foreign agent of Israel, gets paid $1.5 million a month, and then shares that bounty with other people in the media. That's literally his job, is to pay people to support Israel in this country, and to do that through the media. And who's Ben Shapiro kidding? Does he think that there's a single American who he can trick into thinking that he's not in favor of Israel, that he's just objective? He just objectively finds Israel the greatest nation on earth, and how America should be the loyal servant of Israel and give them hundreds of billions of dollars and conduct every war that Israel commands us to conduct and waste trillions of dollars. Ben, we all know that you love Israel and you're the most biased person in the whole country. Everybody knows that you want America to serve your favorite country in the world, Israel. The idea that we benefit from this relationship is a joke. The idea that they're not all over our media is a joke. Ben Shapiro's on our media. Ben Shapiro 100% is in favor of Israel. Fox News, run by a radical Zionist, Rupert Murdoch. Every single anchor is on their knees for Israel every day. We showed it earlier on the program. Oh my God, everybody's an anti-Semite. You better support Israel, bow to Israel, pay Israel, do Israel's wars. We're not blind and we're not deaf. Ben, you could keep lying, and all of your radical Zionist friends that are all over media, infiltrating this country, infiltrating our Congress. It's super obvious, to the point where even JD Vance has to say something about it, because now 57% of Republicans under the age of 50 have also woken up and realized that Israel's not our ally, they're our enemy. They're an enemy that has infiltrated this country in every way. They've stolen trillions of dollars from us and gotten so many Americans killed. They've stolen our nuclear weapon technology, they've stolen our nuclear triggers, and they've stolen our uranium, which I'm positive Ben Shapiro knows a thing or two about. And if you don't, Ben, maybe you should check with some of your family members. So these are the people who've been betraying us the entire time. The fact that JD Vance is stating it about 2% is the tip of the iceberg. And Shapiro's super worried that Americans are going to find out what his country, Israel, has been doing to us all this time.
Yeah, and it seems inevitable. When you mention the money and so much of it that's been spent in this campaign, and yet the numbers are moving in the direction Israel and their supporters don't want it to go in. It does make me wonder about, well, what's their next pivot? Because there's not much nuance to this, with the Ben Shapiros of the world. So we'll see.
No, I know what the next pivot is. It's direct oppression. Since they lost the debate, Ben Shapiro has almost no viewers left, and they've been utterly destroyed in the media wars. They still have their stupid puppets in cable news that no one believes in. They're laughing stocks, totally humiliating themselves every day. We've won the crowd. 60% of the country is now woken up to how Israel's taken advantage of us this entire time and currently controls about 94% of our Congress. We're in a fury, so he's lost that debate completely. They're now going to go to direct oppression. That's why Stephen Miller gave a speech yesterday about how, oh no, there are left-wing terrorists. He didn't talk about how any instances of left-wing terrorism. And he just said we have to start taking their freedoms away and stuffing them into prisons. It isn't about the left wing. Then they're gonna have a Democratic president also bribed by the Israelis that's gonna say, oh, this is the Republican terrorists and the right-wing terrorists. And oh, look at that, who did we call a terrorist? Anyone opposing Israel. And then we started locking more and more people up on behalf of Israel and never on behalf of Norway or Nicaragua or Kazakhstan or the Philippines or any other country. It's always Israel. And every time they go, just because your entire Congress is owned by us and the entire national media serves us, and you have given us trillions of dollars and helped us murder people and genocide them and do all of these wars, you guys are obsessed with Israel. What's the big deal? Isn't every country doing that? No, not every country's doing that. Only Israel's doing that. And so I'm tired of being ruled by this pissant country run by a bunch of terrorists. Let's stand up, America. Stand up, man. Have some courage and run these sons of bitches out of town. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.